What's going on, you guys? Welcome back to First Person Reviewer. It's your boy John, and today we're going to be reviewing the long-awaited Zack Snyder's Justice League. Today's video is going to start a little bit different than usual. Unlike my previous two reviews of WandaVision and The Mandalorian, which were full spoiler reviews, I'm going to be starting with a spoiler-free review. But if you've already seen the film and want to get straight into the juice and the details, feel free to click the link to go to my spoiler review, where I go a little bit more in-depth and detail part by part and go over some highlights and Easter eggs and all that fun stuff. If you guys are new to the channel, feel free to also check out my intro video, Mandalorian review, and WandaVision review, also linked in the description below. And if you've been keeping up with First Person Reviewer, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. The little support that I've gotten has meant the absolute world. Also, just a quick personal side note, if you may have noticed, I am still experimenting with lighting and my setup, my angles, my equipment. I'm relatively new to this, so I'm still kind of in the process of getting everything perfect. So my background or lighting may fluctuate from time to time, so just bear with me. Today's also going to be marking the first entry into my DC review series. If you've seen my Mandalorian review, then you know that I have started a Star Wars review series, given that I'm very passionate about Star Wars and it has such a broad spectrum of entertainment. I really kind of wanted to separate it from my general content into its own series. There are several other franchises like Marvel that I'm also going to be covering on this channel that I could make a series out of if I wanted to as well, but really DC and Star Wars are two of my really big passions. There's so many DC films, games, television shows, animated series that are both upcoming and from the past that I am so excited to talk about. I mean, I have such a passion for this world, all the same as Star Wars, so there's going to be a lot of fun videos upcoming within this series. And there's no better one to start with than today's video. This has been very long awaited for me, something I have been waiting for years. This was a very, very big one for me, guys, and it's going to be glorious to talk about. It was glorious to watch. So without further ado, let's get right into it with Zack Snyder's The Justice League. Let me just begin by saying that this film is very special to me. It holds a very special place in my heart. If it wasn't already obvious, I am a colossal DC fan. It goes hand in hand with Star Wars. Those are the two big ones. Batman is my favorite superhero of all time. Most of my favorite comic book movies of all time are DC films, and I was very, very much a big fan of Snyder's vision with Man of Steel and the ultimate cut of Batman vs. Superman, which is by far the superior viewing experience of that film. Certain aspects of both of those films don't always hold up, but I was largely for Snyder's direction and vision and portrayal of these characters within both of those films, and the overall world of DC leading right into his Justice League. For those who don't know, Snyder unfortunately was not able to complete his film due to a family tragedy that struck during mid-production, which led Warner Brothers to tasking Joss Whedon, the director of the first two Avengers films, with finishing Zack's work. A combination of incompetent studio interference with Warner Brothers' desire to shift the tone and direction of this film midway to emulate Marvel Studios' formula after the reception from Batman vs. Superman, Joss Whedon's complete disregard for Zack's vision and all the footage that he had already shot, along with several reshoots, and Whedon being just an absolute shit heave of a human being, caused the 2017 theatrical release of this film to be a choppy, dual-toned, nightmarish clusterfuck of cringe humor and just awful direction. Not since 2009's X-Men Origins Wolverine had comic book and superhero characters been represented and portrayed so poorly. Sometime after its theatrical release throughout these last few years, there had been several echoes surrounding the existence of Snyder's cut of the film, which after several months of traction from the DC community and the fan base and the fans of Zack Snyder's films, transitioned into a full-blown movement titled #Release the Snyder Cut. Despite Warner Brothers refusing to admit this thing's existence, Zack was continually adamant about it, and eventually the cast even stepped forward to confirm its existence. And after many long years of a tug-of-war between the studio and Zack Snyder and the fan base, it's finally here. We are finally here. It's on HBO Max streaming this very second, and the only question that there is to ask is it better than the Justice League? And the answer is infinitely. If you've seen any trailers for this film, then you already know that it was entirely shot in a 4:3 IMAX ratio that Snyder fell in love with while filming Batman vs. Superman in IMAX. And honestly, I ended up falling in love with it myself. Some people were disappointed with this ratio and complained about it being too boxy, and it might be a little distracting or take an adjustment period at first, but for me, within just a few minutes of immersion, I never really noticed it again. And it gives this film a real cinematic, epic feel that a 16:9 ratio just would not capture. Getting to see every last inch of every shot is truly epic. If there is one thing that Zack excels at as a director, is directing an epic. This movie is quite literally a sci-fi fantasy epic. That's really what it is. It's a DC sci-fi fantasy epic, and honestly, I haven't really felt this scale of epicness since The Lord of the Rings. This film is truly unprecedented. Really, nothing else has ever really been done like this before, and it really breaks the barrier in terms of what is now possible with filmmaking with a 4-hour runtime and being dissected into 6 parts, an epilogue, and end credits. But then again, I once marathoned all 3 Lord of the Rings in the same day, so that might just say a little bit more about me. Director's cuts, for better or for worse, have been done before. Several of them have been released in the past, with the more notable like the infamous Donner cut of Superman 2, James Cameron's cut of Aliens, Ridley Scott's cut of Blade Runner, and several others, but none of them have ever actually changed the way that filmmakers and creatives can now approach the filmmaking process. Breaking this movie down into 6 individual parts was brilliant on Zack's behalf. It tremendously works in this film's favor and not only makes for a more digestible runtime, but also provides a very unique viewing experience. There have been countless instances where films had to be shaved down due to studio interference and pressure on the filmmaker in order to meet runtime quotas for theatrical release that just end up harming the flow of the storytelling. And now with the accessibility and capabilities of streaming services, the door of possibilities has been swung wide open for directors to utilize and deliver so much more well-paced and fleshed out storytelling. While watching it with my friends, after each part ended, we would take about 10 to 15 minutes to just stretch and discuss what happened and even make some predictions of what's to come, and it was a blast. It was so much fun. And taking those breaks never halted the film's momentum, and neither does dividing it. Each part really feels like it has a beginning and an end that are cohesive. It never felt like it was just sliced up and they placed part 1 and part 2 and part 3 and etc. wherever they felt like it. While at its core, it follows the same story structure as the theatrical release, largely surrounding around Steppenwolf trying to obtain the mother boxes in order to perform the Unity and terraform the Earth in the name of Darkseid, while Batman simultaneously searches for members of the Justice League after the realization that an apocalyptic event is on its way. However, the who, what, when, where, and hows are completely different. Unlike the theatrical solely centering on Steppenwolf, Snyder actually features Darkseid in this film, being voiced by Ray Porter, who was phenomenal. The day that I first saw Thanos in the Avengers 1 post-credit in theaters, the first thing I thought to myself, aside from, holy shit, I can't believe this is happening, is, wow, I really hope to see Justice League and Darkseid receive this treatment one day. And it was honestly just as glorious as I ever imagined. Since this was the first of a trilogy that was planned by Zack, he doesn't get that much screen time with the intention of him making a return in the second and third Justice League. But each and every time that he is on the screen, he has an incredible and immense presence regardless of how brief, and is beautifully executed by Snyder. But the real surprise of this film was Steppenwolf, which compared to the Justice League is night and day in both design and character. This is a major improvement in every sense of the meaning of the word. The detail on his armor is incredible. The way that each individual blade moves and reflects, and the way that it peels off his body, revealing his true form. He is easily one of the more, if not the most impressive CGI work within the film. This is the Steppenwolf that Zack intended, and it aligns with the design and character that was revealed in the Batman vs. Superman Ultimate Cut. I seriously cannot wrap my head around why they would change his design from this to whatever the hell this is supposed to be.
You will love me.
The runtime allows for significantly more fleshed out storytelling and more character development from our main characters, especially Cyborg, Flash, and Aquaman, who at the time of the theatrical release were entirely new characters being introduced. Cyborg, above all, was done the dirtiest in the theatrical release. His entire background, origin story, character development, his arc with his father, his arc with his mother, everything about him that made him interesting or a character was completely spliced and belittled by Whedon in the theatrical release. He went from being a relatively bland character within that film to being one of the highlights, if not the highlight of this film. Most of my favorite scenes from this movie were surrounding Cyborg scenes. Ray Fisher does such a fantastic job in this movie, and he does such a fantastic job bringing the heart and the emotion into this film. He is undoubtedly one of the more interesting characters from this roster, and the way that Zack utilizes his powers and capabilities in this film is magnificent. Like, they do some really cool shit with Cyborg. We get some really well directed and written introductions to each member of the League, with my absolute favorite being the Flash's, which is also now my favorite super speed scene to be put on the screen by Hollywood since Quicksilver's in Days of Futures Past. The visuals during this sequence, and really all the Speed Force sequences within this movie, especially towards the final act, are beautifully shot. They are a sight to behold, and like nothing I've ever really seen before with speed powers. The balance of screen time for each character is excellent, and the way that these characters intertwine paths through the storytelling is significantly more organic than the fucking Justice League, where things just happen and people just appear. There's absolutely zero flow of events in that movie. The cast is excellent and has such great chemistry with one another that you really feel come off the screen in this version. There are some great interactions between them that are no longer shackled by Whedon's corny humor. And it is all so well paced that you really hardly feel the 4-hour runtime, whether you take breaks or watch it consecutively. Zack has received a lot of criticism for not truly understanding these characters because of certain creative choices that he's made in their portrayals, especially with Batman and Superman, but I could not disagree more. He just understood that it's more interesting to challenge these characters morally rather than just pander to tradition and what's been done 100 times before. But to even do that, you need to understand what comprises these characters to begin with. The perfect example is having a character like Batman break his one and only code due to being shrouded by his own reason and rage. The core of Batman's character is literally reason, and that very thing ends up being his downfall. It gives his character flaws, and it sets the stage for more compelling and refreshing storytelling, especially with how saturated DC's library is with Batman stories. This mistake also sets Bruce on a character arc that comes full circle within this movie and ends up being the catalyst of the Justice League's assembly. DC's multiverse spans across several mediums of games, TVs, movies, comic books, and each and every one of them offers new iterations of these characters. No two of them are exactly the same, and that's exactly what I want to see. That's what I want more of. Diversity, variation. It is refreshing to see these characters battle with their identities. And I honestly really admire that Zack did not cater to the reception of BVS or the studio demands or anything else but his own portrayal of these characters. He stood true to his portrayal of Batman and Superman, and I love them. I love Batfleck, and I love Cavill as Superman. Christopher Reeves will forever be an icon and a legend. His portrayal will go on in infamy, and I understand that to many people, that is Superman. I respect it, but when it comes to this DCEU, Cavill's campy Superman,
But I'm also a big fan of justice.
was just awful. It was unorganic to this universe, and I much prefer Snyder's grounded and grittier version of Superman in Man of Steel, BVS, and this Justice League, with a Superman that is still learning how to live on this world of mortals, being a god. From the very start, throughout the entire runtime of this film, it is very apparent just how superior this film is, and that this is the version that should have been released in theaters in 2017. Zack's direction is bold, epic, and a breath of fresh air, and after watching, I realized that the only scenes that I enjoyed from Justice League were all Zack's scenes. Everything that I hated about it and everything that didn't work was all Whedon's input and Whedon's direction. However, despite how much I loved it and enjoyed this film, your experience with it will definitely vary depending on where you stand with not only DC, but the DCEU especially. There is so much for the diehard fans of both the comics and movies to absolutely drool over within this film, but it might be a little bit more difficult for casual fans to digest. One of the film's few flaws is that it doesn't waste any time over explaining or spoon feeding exposition to its audience. It really just assumes that you already know about much of what it is referencing, such as the nightmare reality from Batman vs. Superman, Jason Todd being killed by the Joker, the anti-life equation, which really isn't explained much outside of just mentioning its name. This wasn't an issue for me personally, but if you are a newcomer to DC or these movies, it can be very easy to find yourself lost in the mythology of it all. This film is by no means perfect, as few films are. There were some shoddy green screen work, especially during the Amazonian sequence with the Amazonians on horseback. But honestly, in the larger picture, it is rather insignificant compared to some of these mind-blowing effects that were achieved during this movie. Also, not every single joke lands. There really isn't that much humor to begin with, not nearly as much forced cringe humor as the Whedon cut.
Well, I knew you didn't bring me back because you like me. I don't. Not.
DC is still struggling to find the perfect formula for humor within the DCEU, which was very evident in Aquaman and Shazam, which I both thoroughly enjoyed a lot, but both were also hindered by some cheesy humor.
Could have just peed on it.
They haven't quite nailed the humor yet, but in my opinion, this is a significant step up from the theatrical release and is really a perfect blend of comedic relief and humor with Snyder's gritty tone. Just as a theatrical, the comedic relief primarily falls upon the Flash, and just as I said, it doesn't work every single time.
Oh, wow, they really just vanish. Huh? Oh, that's rude.
But Flash specifically was far superiorly written, directed, and represented in comparison to this.
Like brunch. Like, what is brunch? You wait in line for an hour for essentially lunch. I mean, I don't know.
The comedy is a fucking mile leap from Whedon's awful, awkward cringe humor and belittling these characters at the expense of a joke.
Yeah. Oh, something is definitely bleeding.
The R rating tremendously complements this film. The violence was palpable and grounding, and it never felt out of place. This film is honestly now one of the prime examples of just how integral music is to molding and shaping a film's tone. The score adjacent to the performances from this cast is easily the heart of this movie and this story. From the very beginning to the very end, this score takes you on an insane journey, and the whole way through assures you just how epic the scale of this mythology really is. And I'm honestly just so happy that Zack finally got to redeem his story and his direction, and that all the actors and crew that worked so hard on this project finally got to see their hard work pull off. If you're a DC fan, you are going to have a blast with this film, and even if you aren't and are just a fan of action films or sci-fi fantasy epics, give it a chance because it will not disappoint. I cannot recommend this movie enough. It is easily the best film that the DCEU has put out to date, and is honestly one of the best DC films in general. I'm going to give Zack Snyder's Justice League a 9 out of 10. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching, guys. Honestly, it is incredibly appreciated as always. And if you have already seen or intend to watch this film after this review, please make sure to check in on my spoiler review of the film. And if you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, please leave a like and subscribe and click the little bell for notifications. Stay tuned for some more upcoming reviews of Godzilla vs. Kong, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and Mortal Kombat. And stay tuned for some upcoming original discussion pieces on some top 10s regarding Star Wars, Marvel, DC, comic book movies, films, television shows, games, a lot of nerdy stuff. But I am very excited to start working on those videos. This is something I've been wanting to do with this channel since I started it, and I'm really excited to share it with you guys. It's going to be a lot of fun. So stay tuned, take care, and I will see you guys at the spoiler review.